All right, can you hear me? All right, so I get to start, and yes, I'll wander all over and just don't distract when Dr. Kuntz is speaking. All right. How many people get questions in there, have questions about CBD today? Oh, yeah. Okay, we're not going to probably be able to answer every single last one of them, but we're going to give it our best shot. Okay? Now, the first thing you get to hear is that, guess what? I'm a lawyer. But for many of you, I'm not your lawyer, so they make me put this up there. But for those of you that I am your lawyer, and yes, I know who you are, we'll have a talk later about it. So let's give you a little bit of a roadmap of where we're going to go. We're going to talk a little bit about what CBD is, because you know there's a lot of confusion. We're going to talk about state CBD laws. We're then going to sort of talk about marijuana versus hemp. Yeah, those are magic terms that you're going to have to learn about. The magic 2018 Farm Bill, what we know about it, and frankly, what we're still waiting to find out. And then the two burning questions in terms of policy. Will CBD usage cause a THC positive on a workplace drug test? Will industrial hemp cause a THC positive on a workplace test? And then, again, this is absolutely changing from a scientific point of view all the time of how does it fit into your drug testing policy? So our goal is to answer all of these. Some of them you may want more specificity, but we'll tell you what we know today. So with that, I'm going to tell you that I'm just a lawyer, but I really have an expert here on some of these things. So I'm going to turn over to Dr. Kuntz to first off talk about what is CBD.
Well, thank you. You know, this could be an all, it's very loud, all chemical talk, but this is going to be on chemistry light, okay? So you won't get lost. But the CBD and THC are kind of like sister chemicals. They come from the same drug or the same starter compound, CBG. And so you do produce, depends on which enzyme path it goes down the divided highway. So one side is CBD and the other one is THC. So they are different, but they're very, very similar. And that's where we start getting into the problems of how we deal with all of this. So CBD traditionally has been found in very low amounts in marijuana. This is, 1%, 4%, whatever it's going to be of the total cannabinoids. But that's all changed. So we're just going to focus on CBD today, and we've been doing some research at Clinical Reference Laboratory with the federal program on this, so we know a lot more than we did a few months ago, last year for sure. So we now know some things, and we'll get into that. But CBD is really not psychotropic as such. It is the THC that's been the psychotropic. For decades, it kind of talked to yin and yang, and the CBD is kind of gets you from getting too high. But it doesn't act in the same place. We have always talked about CB1 receptors in your brain. That's where marijuana interacted, created your high. But CBD really doesn't do that at all. It's kind of an antagonist, and there's a whole bunch of other enzyme pathways that cause it, that make it work around your body. So it is not the same. It does not affect your behavior in the same way. And so there are different medical benefits than from THC. And as you can see, we'll get into this a little bit more, it's listed as an anticonvulsant, it's anti-inflammatory, it's antipsychotic, anxiolytic, on and on. And then this really all became real popular when we started having the epilepsy children and then finding out that CBD did work. And so it went from an unknown kind of a compound, it's kind of a bad thing, to a wonder drug. So that has kind of moved this needle along. So very briefly, THC is psychotropic, CBD not. It can increase anxiety and paranoia. And you probably have heard about that because of children eating THC bears, gummy bears, and all of that. They have the psychotic episodes, and the CBD does the other. You fall asleep a little bit better with THC. You don't necessarily do that as much with CBD. So, the one confirmed treatment is that childhood epilepsy. So the claimed medical benefits are, you can read through that list. But there's been some studies out there that talk about how prevalent is the usage. And probably 1 out of 4 people have tried in the last couple of years. And it depends on the age group, what group do you belong in. So if you are young, 18 to 30 type of thing, you're going to want to do it for more relaxation. And if you're older, like me, a 65 plus, you're going to use it for joint pain. So it depends on what group that you're in. So it does seem to have certain effects, with the GI disorders and probably some of that. With better studies, we can get better information. So that's kind of just starts you out. Faye's going to continue.
Well, I think that a lot of people, okay, first off, how many people have heard of the 2018 Farm Bill? Exactly. I don't think that you're as familiar with some of the state laws that predate it. I'm really now talking, and we're going to go briefly, so let's make sure that we fit our CBD laws into it. And even Texas, which is one of the most restrictive states, has its own high CBD, low THC law. But first off, let's just say where we're at for the cannabis. Yes, this might look familiar to some of you. We've got a lot of states that have medical marijuana. This is comprehensive. This is not CBD. 33 plus some others. Another 14 states have passed low THC, high CBD laws. That's where our focus on state laws is going to be. One state has industrial hemp, or I've been instructed as of 2018, when it goes into effect, it's just now hemp. Beyonce's only Beyonce. It's no longer industrial hemp, it's hemp. And 11 states, DC, and 2 U.S. territories have recreational marijuana. So that's sort of where we start. This is a map, just so you know, and the ones in this color are the 14. Nevada does have hemp, but the other ones are different, just to give you a sense. There is some geographic areas, and it is really a fairly big area. If you look in the southeastern part of the U.S., and it used to be more so. Some of these states, and Arkansas has passed medical marijuana. So, but before we get there, let's talk about federal law. I'm now talking about not hemp. Hemp we're going to get to, but high CBD, low THC products is a Schedule I drug. So you now have a DOT truck driver. What do you do when they claim CBD usage as a reason for their THC positive? They have a federal employee. So let's start from that. As of right now, all Dr. Kuntz and I can talk about today, because as he's already indicated, things are moving fast. It is not a reasonable medical explanation and will not be overturned. So regardless of what all we're going to talk about right now, if you're a pilot and you test positive and you say, but I use CBD, it doesn't matter. It stays a positive and you have to be removed from a safety-sensitive position. Lots of stuff is going on, but that's the status from a federal level. Okay? So now let's talk about the states. And I'm really going to focus on the 14 that do not have medical marijuana, because it tends to be subsumed. So, how many remember, in 2013, there was a documentary called Weed. Dr. Sanjay Gupta of CNN did it. And it was really fairly ground-shaking that they put out, and this is where childhood epilepsy became such a big deal, where intractable seizures, hundreds a day, and this was called Charlotte's Web, you may remember that it was anecdotal, there weren't a lot of studies on it, there have been some since, but the idea of this was a miracle drug for small children, and of course, it was very appealing. Almost immediately, which trust me, for the law, for something to happen in 2013, in 2014, we already had books on, laws on the books talking about this. The states that didn't have this put forward laws to allow this usage. So this is not, by the way, just so we're clear, this is not going to Bed Bath & Beyond or your gas station and buying CBD. That's a whole different thing we'll talk about in a moment. This is legal under Virginia. Now, are the laws all the same? Oh, that would be far too easy. Far too easy. No, they're all different. Everything's different. Is there a registry? Is there the amount of THC permitted in it? Is it by ratio to CBD? Is it by volume? Across the board. Do not assume that because you understand how it works in Virginia, that you know how it works in South Carolina. Very, very different. And various qualifying conditions. So you're in the lovely state of Texas, and if you want to have it in Texas, you do have to be a small child with intractable epilepsy and have failed 2 different types of opioid schemes before you'd be eligible. There are dispensaries. It's very, very restrictive. You can't have more than 0.1% of THC. Far more restrictive than the Farm Bill, by the way. So that just gives you a thing. So let's look at this, and you're going to get these slides, and we have all of this for you. These are the 14 states, and look at South Carolina, at least 98% CBD and not more than 0.9% THC by volume. Because there's always a bit of, it's always a ratio, but it's a ratio to what that matters. Look at Virginia, at least 15% CBD, but no more than 5% THC. Let me tell you, folks, 5% THC is a fair amount of THC in this, okay? You have Wyoming of less than or equal to 0.3% THC and at least 5% CBD by weight. You understand they're all different. Now, so that gives you a sense. So each state and the conditions where you can get it are very, very different. Is it well regulated in the states? No. No, 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 no. You're not hearing about people being arrested for having CBD. Though they might, this is a tough one, but many states don't have purity or potency testing. Some do, again. One of the things about CBD or THC in general, just so you know, is it's very highly toxic to mold, so there could be some nasty stuff in it just as part of the manufacturing process. So that puts us a sense of where we're at from a state law perspective. But of course, where we really want to go and start really, so that's fine, we can all ignore it. And one of the things that's helpful here, none of these laws give explicit employment protections for CBD use. Okay? So the laws themselves, that we're going to talk about some other things you have to consider, but unlike some medical marijuana statutes, where you have to accommodate medical marijuana use, these simply are silent on all of those, and frankly, I'm not aware of any case law so far that is challenging the employment status. We'll talk about other lawsuits that we're aware of on that. But that sort of gives us, so let's go, so that's marijuana, that's CBD, but not hemp. So what I'm going to turn it over and let Dr. Kuntz explain, because get this verbiage right, it's going to make a difference to your policy. What's marijuana? What's hemp?
Oh, excuse me. So this is a very simple chart. So we have a line. As Faye will talk about with the Farm Act bill, it's all about 0.3% or less makes it hemp. And so anything greater than that makes it marijuana. So that's a very important distinction because marijuana is a Schedule I drug. If it's less, 0.3% or less, it's on-schedule drug. So there's a lot of things going on with this law that you drew the line and whether that line's the right number or not. And so there's going to be, I think the next slide up is getting into the Farm Bill and what that all means and how do you quantitate what's 0.3%. So if your crop is greater than 0.3%, what do you do with it? So those are all covered under the USDA.
And you think it's easy. No, it's not easy. Okay, so Dr. Kuntz explained that it's 0.3%. 0.3% of what? So Dr. Kuntz, did you explain a little bit about, at least under the Farm Bill, and then I'll explain how confusing it is. What's the 0.3%?
It's by dry weight of the plant. But nobody defines, to my knowledge, how much of that plant there is. I mean, the plant can grow 6 feet tall. So how much of that is waste? Remember that THC is only in the little flowering buds with the trichomes. So now you have a very small amount and an 8-foot tall plant. So that's part of that dilemma of how did you determine what's legal, what's illegal.
For many people, the Farm Bill kind of came out of nowhere. And it kind of did. And so let's talk a little bit about what it is, what we know, and what we're still waiting for. A little clue, it's what we're still waiting for. So, there is the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018. This is a USD, this is an agricultural. This is actually, comes out of something, how many had ever heard of, before the 2018 Farm Bill, about the pilot program of the 2014 Farm Bill? I can't raise my hand because I wasn't really cognizant. But there was a 2014 Farm Bill that defined hemp in the same way, but it was a pilot program. So this is, but it expired. It was expiring in 2018, and they expanded it. And they added some important stuff. This is now the money crop for a lot of states, a lot of counties, people believe. We're going to see whether that's true or not. Now, much of the Farm Bill has nothing to do with CBD. It has, does it cover things like rope and all things we think about hemp? It does. We're not going to talk about those. We're going to focus on what it means for what the old school would call CBD. The first thing it does, and without any notice, is if you match that magic less than 0.3% by dry weight, whatever that means, it is no longer a Schedule I drug. Okay? I mean, that is earth-shattering in the drug testing and the drug enforcement arena. That we now have a non-prescription asterisk on Epidiolex that is now legal. There's no dosage. There's no requirements. It just flat isn't controlled anymore. But now understand, it does not generally legalize most CBD products. Now, we're going to see where the FDA and some of the others go, and the DEA. But there's a lot of requirements in the Farm Bill about certified farms and what the position's going to be and whether it's product tested. I don't know how those are going to be enforced. But what is being bought off of Amazon generally is not congruent. Like it has to have certain product testing. Because you understand that if there's testing done and you as a grower exceed 0.3%, you must destroy the crop. That's right. You are a grower, you've spent your sweat and anguish growing it, and you get to destroy it. We're not there yet. We don't know about the regulations, but it's going to be tough. So, with that, this is actually a definition. Dr. Kuntz gave sort of a short definition, and you're going to see that this is sort of the 0.3%. It has to be destroyed. And we've given you another piece of information. CBD concentrations in the 1 to 4% range in normal marijuana, but there's CBD cultured strains that have a 20 to 1 ratio of CBD to THC. So you can see that there's a lot of growth and unique engineering in the farming world that make it a very, very different. So this is what we're looking at in the Farm Bill. There are no regulations yet. So please understand that we're still waiting for a whole bunch. Now, what's interesting about this is the USDA now has put what's a potency in cannabis to prepare it. We don't have, so we know that whatever happens from a grower point of view, which is all what we got right now, it's 0.3%. Dr. Kuntz alluded to the fact this has nothing to do with the extraction and the prep and the final product. We believe that that's going to be FDA and perhaps the DEA, because you understand, you could take dry plant weight, distill it down, and have whatever amount you need. One thinks though not yet, that there may be something, because you could have really, really potent THC and still have 0.3% dry plant weight as a grower. So this is all in the don't know category. We haven't seen it. They haven't weighed in or published anything to give definitive. We do know they're looking at it, and we do know there's a decent amount of pressure on them. They at first said it was going to be 3 to 5 years before they'd get stuff out. I think they were urged to push that along a little bit, because we don't know how much THC in the final finished product is going to be allowed. We don't know if it's going to be a percentage by volume, which can be manufactured, or a percentage ratio to the amount of CBD in the product. All consequences as we sit today. And so as we move forward, you know, we're hoping to have them by the end of the year. All I can say is they're not out yet. They haven't weighed in, and they haven't given anything. We anticipate, you know, we don't know what the oversight's going to be. We don't know, I mean, all of this stuff, we just know it's a Schedule 5 concoction right now, because that's what they've said it is. We have issued, the only thing that has been issued is the Office of the Inspector General of the USDA has said if it was produced in accordance with the 2014 Farm Act, that it is in fact not scheduled. I don't know of anything you can buy that has that, so it may be quite the unicorn, but theoretically it's available. So as of right now, I think Dr. Kuntz, we have more questions than answers of what's this going to look like for the consumer. We do not know whether there's going to be dosage. I don't know if they can have requirements. They might have, I predict they'll have suggestions, but since it's an unscheduled drug, you know, they can have dosage requirements on aspirin, but it doesn't make it illegal if you take too much aspirin. Might end up in the hospital, but we just are going to have to wait and see. So that's sort of the standard on where we're at with the Farm Bill. More questions and answers. So let's go to the question I believe you all want to know. That I know Dr. Kuntz gets asked all the time, as do I. He's a scientist, so we'll let him answer it. Will the use of CBD, I'm not talking hemp now, I'm talking CBD products, cause a user to test positive for THC? And let's use for a workplace drug test. Dr. Kuntz, can you help us out with that?
I can. The federal government actually has studies going on with CBD that I'm involved with at CRL. And so there is pure CBD chemical out there. So that becomes a Schedule 5. Pure CBD is Schedule 5. Yeah, you have a Schedule 1, you have a Schedule 5, you have an unregulated. So, but pure CBD was given to donors under quarantine types of conditions, and you know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars have been spent on recruiting these people and giving them the CBD. It's 100% pure, and we ran those tests, whether you are looking at a cutoff of 20 nanograms per mil, which is a lot of people with DISA have, or 50 or 100, they all come up 0. They don't even come close to the cutoff. So there is, CBD is fine with the drug test if you have pure CBD. And I think that's kind of where we're at. So do not worry if it's pure CBD, but I know that, you know, even Charlotte's Web type of solutions, you know, anecdotally, people on them for a period of time, weeks or months, they all have a little bit, and it's a cumulative. So a single dose is usually pretty much okay. It's like when you're on a chronic administration of CBD. And, you know, I'll just throw this in, but during I was having lunch and I pulled up the web, and it's all about Coca-Cola adding CBD to Coca-Cola, and they're more worried about the sugar than the CBD and obesity. But then when you start putting it into all of your products, it's no longer that little jar, that little tincture. Now CBD is going to be available to everybody, no matter on your age. So it is a depends question.
And let's talk about something. So Dr. Kuntz has given us the science. It's different analytically from THCA, and it's different analytically from THC. So pure CBD, you're not going to have a problem. But the it doesn't stop there. And Dr. Kuntz talked a little bit about little amounts. How about not so little amounts? Some studies have looked at a variety of CBD products. Whatever that says on the label, it might be true. And it might not be true. It is not federally regulated. No dosage standards have been developed. And most importantly, no purity or potency standards are enforced. Couple states, if you're a registry, you can get it, but even in Texas, where we're quite restrictive, you can go buy it anywhere you want. One study found that 69% of 84 CBD products were inconsistent with the labeling. Why is that? Let me tell you, purity and potency testing is expensive. How much do you do by lot? Are you doing a whole bunch? That's part of the issue with the Farm Bill. It's going to be expensive. So some of them, and I'm about to give you a couple of examples, no clue. Whatever you're taking in, and again, I mean, it is ubiquitous how often, it's really good for you. You know, I like the good for what ails you story. But they have no clue. And the fact that the product says THC free or 0.3%, whatever, doesn't mean anything. Because contamination with more than that little bit, Dr. Kuntz talked about the cumulative effects, but that's not the only issue. So let's talk about those who have bad outcomes. Let's talk about the Horn case. Ongoing right now. Mr. Horn was a responsible person. He was a truck driver, DOT truck driver. He bought 100% THC-free CBD oil, and he bought 2 bottles. Because he knew he was subject to DOT testing. He was trying to do the right thing. He tested for THC under the federal program, and guess what? He was fired. So he took his unopened bottle of CBD oil and sent it off to a lab at his own expense for testing because, again, he was trying to do the right thing. There was so much THC in it, they confiscated and called the DEA. All I can tell you is a trucker's lawsuit against the manufacturer is currently pending. That is not the only one. I get involved in all sorts of things for all types of clients. This is not particularly a laboratory problem or an MRO problem or an employer problem, except kind of, but what it is people try to do the right thing and depend on labeling, and these become labeling problems. Manufacturers' lawsuits, who obviously probably have lost their job because they use CBD oil that, you can call it unintentional drug use if you want to. It didn't save their employment status. And as you can imagine, just if someone, we all know the story. How many times has anyone heard in the early days of drug testing, but the cocaine was put into my drink while I was at a bar. I really didn't intend to do it. Yeah, you're still fired. Unintentional use of an illegal product does generally not save you. Okay, so that's CBD. You don't know what's in that product. The user does not know what's in that product. And as Dr. Kuntz points out, the idea of 100% CBD is pretty darn rare. Even Epidiolex can have 0.1% THC. I don't think it'll make you test positive, but the problem is, part of it is, scientifically, on a manufacturing, can you always get to 0.0? You know, how much can you test for? It's always a problem. Even Epidiolex, which is incredibly regulated. Don't misunderstand me. Okay, so we now know about sort of on-the-street CBD, I'm going to call it. And I'm intentionally calling it CBD, not hemp. Hemp has a very special word. That's this, whatever it's going to have a special meaning of 0.3, less than 0.3% with all of the machinations. It's something different because it's unscheduled. So let's talk about the next question I always get. Will consumption of hemp cause a user to test positive for THC on workplace drug test? I'll give you the answer and let Dr. Kuntz talk about it a little bit. Yeah, that's the question marks. So can you give a little bit of an overview, Dr. Kuntz, of just sort of how much we, frankly, how much we don't know?
The part of those studies is, as we know, that the products aren't pure. And so the amount of THC that you're continually getting from your hemp origin is really unknown. So there's, the cost for the vendors to do this would be, thousands of dollars to validate a production lot. And a production lot could be as little as a pound, or it could be 1,000 pounds, depends on how much you started with. So, and how well you cleaned it up. So the question is very, very confusing, and I don't really have an answer. Will you turn positive? Probably 99% of the time you will, because of the product quality. And how much are you taking? Now remember on the bottles that you've seen, they're going to talk about this one's 1,000 milligrams and this one's 300 milligrams. Well, that's pretty much the size of the bottle, how much is totally in there. It doesn't reflect your dose. So are you going to be using it twice a day? Are you going to be using a hemp product and, total body massages with hemp oil? Your body just laps up all that oil, you absorb it. There's different ways that you can get there, but it's very difficult to answer that question. In fact, I had a testimony last week. It was a drug case from 2018, and CBD came up in 2019 as the defense. So we don't know enough to know if this is really going to impact all those marijuana cases.
So let me tell you a little bit about what we know you're going to see in the next few months, hopefully, and I predict over the next few years more data coming out on this. So remember, even though assuming you can get the unicorn of hemp under the Farm Bill, I'm not sure, most of the CBD is not available. There are studies going on, but as of this moment, watch this space, I'm not aware of any study where someone actually took hemp that is not and done a study to figure out whether they would or not. I think there's some that are close. You're going to see some come out in the next month or two, but it almost adds more questions than answers. So right at this moment, I don't think we can rule out the possibility that someone who takes it on a regular basis, once it becomes available, will test positive. I also don't think we can rule it in. Because again, we want to follow the science. I think there's some indications that it may be possible, but we just don't have enough information to say definitively yes or no, and we certainly don't know about dose. Dr. Kuntz, would you agree with that?
I do, and part of the problem is in doing the old court cases for the military, everybody had a half a bottle that they always kept in their pocket of something to counteract. So what I worry about with these is how are you going to distinguish between the true CBD user and the one that has a half empty bottle and smokes on the side. So those are ultimately where we're going.
Well, because remember, there is no analytical test to tell the difference between hemp and high CBD, low THC. It's just measuring, because it's a degree of it. So once you get to a donor drug test, it's either CBD or not, or whatever. You can't tell because of the potency and purity. There's no way it's the same analytical product. So we don't have regulations. We don't even have a really clear definition of hemp in a finished product. We do have studies ongoing. And I think literally in the next few months, and in part due to the great work at CRL and at Dr. Kuntz, they're providing some of that analysis for the government to consider. But right now, HHS and DOT are not accepting either CBD or hemp usage as a reasonable medical explanation. Those people are all removed. We're going to watch that, but that's where we stand as we sit here. This is I'd like to be able to give you really firm answers, but I'm not going to mislead you and think something is more definitive than it really is. So with all of that, we have a backdrop now. We now kind of have where we're at. So let's talk about, so now what do we do in the policy? Okay? And these are considerations. I don't have definitive answers. But the first question we have to talk about, what really everyone wants to know is, do I have to accommodate? Do I not have to accommodate? So this all comes about, remember, we have a THCA positive, and the donor claims CBD usage, or hemp usage, or something of that, okay? Now, other than federally regulated ones, could you accommodate legally? Yes. You don't even have to do drug testing, so I'm not saying that's a good idea. I just want you to know there's no prohibition to accommodation. This is all a safety issue. So what do you have to look at? Let's talk about the workforce. This is a corporate decision and an individualized corporate decision, and what works for one company may or may not work for another. What are the job duties of the people involved? I often compare food service people to crane operators. Companies could view those differently. Administrative staff to people on offshore oil rigs, different set of categories. Are they safety sensitive? Little tipper, safety sensitive is not a magic word and doesn't have a single definition. There are a number of them. And here, my favorite is, where are they located? So remember, it's a THC positive. Regardless of usage, if you're in a state that has to accommodate marijuana off-duty use, you're going to have to accommodate it regardless of the reason. That's just beyond the scope of this, but this is all just talking the source of the THC positive. We can talk about that if anyone has questions, but there are states, let's use Nevada pre-employment. After January 1st of 2020, the fact that you test positive on a workplace drug test is no evidence that you have to accommodate it. It's kind of the shorthand for it. And whether that resulted because they're claiming CBD usage or they flat out smoked marijuana doesn't make any difference. So all this is talking about is the source of the THC at the fundamental level. That's all we're talking about. And do you want to accommodate? So the location makes a difference. The laws will be different. Although, as I've told you, on those 14 states, at least there's no explicit employment protection. By the way, little tipper, that's probably going to change just because we're moving more towards that. And your labor pool. I often have a question asked to me and said, I can't find people anyway. What am I supposed to do? And I said, well, I think it's a safety issue, but ultimately that's another corporate factor that has to go into it to make it. I think safety is important, but you have to decide from a corporation what's going to happen, understanding that right now, you don't know what they've taken for CBD. Even if you test for the CBD, it doesn't mean it's legal CBD. It doesn't mean it was hemp. There is no way to distinguish it. All you know is you have a THC positive, and what does that mean in your safety culture? Okay? There is litigation risk of accommodating or not accommodating marijuana use. I mean, we just be upfront, and this is true for all of it. It's a safety hazard. We know that. We believe that. You can't tell whether someone's impaired from marijuana on the job. And most importantly, right now there's no agreed upon peer-reviewed literature to suggest that we can tell that they weren't impaired, frankly, from their CBD use. Because again, you don't know how much THC is in there at this point. The Farm Bill has created a pathway. And I think eventually we're going to get to some more clarity, but we're just not well regulated. So what do you do with all that? So now those are the policy considerations, and I mean that seriously. You better look at your job positions, have good job descriptions, do all the things for marijuana positives are just as true for CBD usage claims as for anything else. I urge a standardized decision tree. There is nothing worse than the CEO's son who pops positive and says, yeah, but I use CBD, and go, that's okay, I know we never let anyone work, but it's too far. Or somebody on the manufacturing line who does the same thing. Unfortunately, that gives rise to things like discrimination claims. It's never very pretty. The other thing is, I don't think most employees know all the things I've just told you and Dr. Kuntz has just told you. They don't think they're impaired. They don't know. I'm a big believer of always let your employees have the opportunity to do the right thing. So if you decide as a corporation you are not going to accommodate THC positive because of CBD use, please, please tell your employees that. And they may not use, they might, but give them the opportunity, because you're going to have a much happier workforce than if they feel like they played a gotcha. Because that's one of the things that I hear of, I thought it was just fine. They don't understand that they could be impaired. Remember Mr. Horn, the truck driver? He thought he was doing the right thing. So I'm urging my employer clients, whatever your decision is made, let it be public, let it be transparent. That is an important policy consideration. Educate them. Educate them they can't be impaired. Educate them that CBD itself is not impairing, but the THC stuff that is in it, of which you have no clue how much it is when you're a CBD user at this moment in time, that you might lose your job. These cases are continuing, generally against the manufacturers of CBD, but people, I think, are trying to do the right thing. They have no clue, is my experience. Dr. Kuntz, would you agree that they really don't know? So with that, I think we still have
One slide.
a few minutes, not much, but we'll take some questions and we'll do the best we can, and we're going to both be available